The menace of corruption has bedeviled Nigeria over the years. Several statutory and policy attempts have been devised to arrest this ill, with hardly a positive result. To tackle the perennial menace, the Buhari administration introduced the whistleblowing program. Although the Senate, at its plenary session on 8 June 2017, passed the Whistleblower Protection Program bill, it is technically not yet law. Designed to encourage anyone with information about violations of financial regulations, mismanagement of public funds, fraud, and theft to report same to relevant authorities, the policy was received with mixed feelings and recorded tremendous success at the initial stage. However, the story subsequently changed. One of the major challenges associated with this policy is lack of adequate clauses and statutes in the legislation facilitating it. Our guest on the program today will be examining those challenges and proffering solutions on the way forward. Hello and welcome to Break It Down. Break It Down is a program where we make matters of policies, societal issues, governance, and development easily understood by all. The topic we have for today is the Whistleblower Policy, the Whistleblower Protection Bill, the challenges and expectations of this bill. Our guest in the studio today is Auwal Rafsanjani, Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. CISLAC, that's what it's called. You're welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, on Break It Down,
yes,
we try to break down big issues into the level of the common man here. You're welcome. And we're talking about the Whistleblower Protection Bill, challenges and expectations. But first, let's look at the Whistleblower Protection, the policy itself. What is the whistleblower? Who is a whistleblower?
Thank you very much. And let me express my appreciation for being invited here to talk about this key important piece of law or policy that could really help to support the fight against corruption. A whistleblower is somebody who works either in the public sector or even in the private sector or even an ordinary citizen who would expose corruption or who would provide credible information that will lead to addressing issues of maladministration, injustice, irregularities, including even religious or ethnic hatreds, and as we've seen so many of such kind of situation happened in Nigeria that cause also more violence in the country.
So it cuts across. It's not just politicians, because when the bill was, when the program was first introduced, Nigerians thought it was just focused on politicians who is hiding money somewhere.
You see, this is part of the misunderstanding of the entire fight against corruption by this administration. The whistleblower is not just looking at politicians; it's also looking at wrongdoing even within companies in the private sector. Whistleblower is also looking at so many irregularities, accounting irregularities, fraud, and so many maladministration within the government institutions and operations. So it is not looking at a particular person alone. It is looking at the whole public sector and private sector maladministration, injustice, corruption, and all sort of fraud that take place.
So anybody who is able to expose that kind of corruption anywhere he is is a whistleblower.
Absolutely, as long as the whistleblower does that with credible information and evidence.
Okay. What if the whistleblower has information and when the authorities get to that point, the information has been sabotaged? What happens?
That is why we need to have a legal framework of having the whistleblowing regime in the country, because if you just have a policy, after the current regime, another regime may not be interested in it. But when you institutionalize it and you have the legal framework that guides how the policy or the legislation could be, what form of the components it could be, because there are level of agencies or level of department and component within the whistleblowing that you must have in order to have a much more institutionalized legal framework. For example, you need to have this policy or this legal framework in place to institutionalize it in the public sector, and even private sector need to be encouraged to establish such kind of a policy, or at least a text that would be able to enable people who will want to expose wrongdoing in those places. Secondly, they also need to ensure that the whistleblower is not burdened by burden of proof. Mm-hmm. Again, when you have a legal framework, it will also protect the safety and security of that legal whistleblower. Okay. The current policy you have, it doesn't have all these components. What it has is basically an incentive that is not even properly defined.
Yes.
For somebody to come up with information.
We'll come to that. But you talked about the government shortfall in the whole of the policy, directing or making it to look like it's directed at just politicians. Do you think, I haven't seen the bill, but does the bill not read out these whole other areas? Does it not cover the whole areas that you have just spoken about?
No, there are so many bills that have been brought before the National Assembly from 1999 to date on whistleblowing. Unfortunately, none of the bill come from the executive. Okay. It has always been a private member bill initiative, and private member bills hardly go anywhere. Out of maybe 10 private member bills, maybe out of 10 bills or 100 bills that will come to the assembly, the one that will be concluded and get assent may not be, out of that 100, may not be more than 1 or 2. So that is why the executive is encouraged to put forward whistleblower bill, so that there will be stakeholders, both from the legislature, from the civil society, from the media, and the general public, that can make input to have a more robust, sustainable, more transparent, whistleblowing regime in the country. Because the whistleblower he needed to be, or she needed to be protected against retaliation. Because when you expose corruption, you are likely going to...
We'll come back to that. That is like what you have in the USA, where you have the witness protection program.
Yeah.
So this policy, as it were now, as it is on ground, is just an executive policy.
Yeah, it is just, an executive... Let me put it this way. It is just an executive order. Okay. And unfortunately, the intent of this is not really to fight corruption. The intent of this is to encourage people to come and tell government about... The whole thing is about recovery. It's about the
recovery of funds that were...
But the whistleblowing regime is gone beyond just, you wanting to collect... Okay. I said, no. It is about also ensure that you block the leakages, in government irregularity, the accounting, lack of accounting, following the due process, bridges in the contract procurement, bridges in the administrative justice system, bridges in also, promotion, of maybe certain, officers, or wrong recruitment, and so many things, So it is not just the issue of recovery money. The problem you have with this government is that most of its anti-corruption is geared towards asset recovery because they need money, so they needed to get money, at all costs, But knowing or forgetting the fact that, fighting corruption is gone beyond just asset recovery. So
I was going to ask that. I was going to, ask if it's not working so far, given the initial objective of the government, which is to recover stolen funds, which we all know how corrupt some of our politicians who have what's it called, who have positions in government are. Don't you think the government was in the right direction for coming out with this, first of all, this emergency order, which looked like an from what you've said? So
we cannot be doing emergency for 5 years. If you really want to institutionalize fight against corruption, you need to institutionalize the fight against corruption and engage the public, through public education. Like I said, the government is not able to engage the general public on even the evil, the consequences of corruption. So it is just about, recovery, and when you recover, what does not also again have legal framework on how to recover and manage this asset. This is why you have the controversy you have today in the country, because you do not have the legal framework on how to manage recovered asset in Nigeria. So you recover from this looter, another looter will loot.
But the government did recover. They recovered a lot of money. That's
what I'm saying. Now you recover a lot of money and asset, and there's no accountability in this recovery. Again, there's no data showing this is how much custom, police, EFCC, ICPC, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and even Code of Conduct. All these agencies, they do assess recovery, and there's no central data to see what XYZ have been recovered. The juries, the gold, the resources, the cash, all of them, where are they? Where will you be able to see what have been recovered domestically? I'm not even talking about international recovery. Domestically, every time security agencies, anti-corruption agencies, they go to, ransack suspected looter, and they recover all this proceeds of crime, and nobody is giving you information on what or where they are or what they have done with it. This is also the part of the shortcoming of the government, in its drive on the anti-corruption.
Okay, let's take a break now. When we get back to the studio, we shall be discussing the bill proper. That is the private bill now that you're talking about, that encompasses everything. We'll be back on Break It Down. We're still on Break It Down, and we're still with Auwal Rafsanjani, Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center. So we're talking the Whistleblower Protection Bill, challenges and expectations. Let's look at the bill proper now, the one that is sponsored by a private individual.
Yeah, like I said, you have several of these bills from 1999 today, but they all, according to legislative procedure and processes, they all elapsed. So right now,
they have elapsed.
They're all elapsed. Right now, you don't have any bill, in the National Assembly on whistleblowing regime. So that's why we want to encourage government to put forward a bill that will be sent to National Assembly, which will look broadly about certain provision that must be contained in such kind of bill for it to be effective and efficient and really deal with corruption in Nigeria, as well as encouraging Nigerians to come forward to expose corruption, as well as also ensuring that they are protected. They are also given incentives that they would be able to do that. Also, to discourage people to make frivolous and justify non-evidence allegation, because sometimes some people, out of desperation to either settle score or to even blackmail, they would make such kind of thing. So there must be consequences of such kind of fake and frivolous allegation without concrete evidence. Even the policy that you have now.
I think the policy that exists now has that.
No, but we are talking about a much more legal framework through enactment of the National Assembly, which will go beyond this government. Because, like I said, the current policy is too narrow-minded. It doesn't look at corruption in the public sector. It doesn't even look at corruption even within the private sector. It doesn't look at how the whistleblower can also be protected. It doesn't also look at how agencies can create channel of reporting, and it doesn't also create room for feedback. These are all things that needed to be
if I may ask, how do you think the whistleblower, if for example someone out there now has information on maybe a big loot from his organization, and he wants to be protected, he doesn't even want to be known, how do you think he can be protected?
There are many ways. First and foremost, you don't need to physically...
Does the policy exist now? Does it adequately protect?
No.
You have said it does not.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I'm saying that for you to have a robust, whistleblowing regime, you need to make it more comprehensive and bring in all these components. For example, you can use hotlines to report corruption. During Okonjo-Iweala, we, started to pilot something because of the corruption in the Ministry of Finance. We started to pilot a project that will encourage contractors, will encourage the staff, and any other person within the Ministry of Finance to report corruption, but not through the ministry, but through an independent private agency. That time it was Zero Corruption Coalition that the minister or the ministry was working with to administer all these complaints and this information. Then Zero Corruption Coalition was processing those information and sending to the minister. Even at that time, like I said, it was not a legal framework. It was just an initiative of the minister at that time. And when she left, that was the end of it. So that is why we need to institutionalize this through the enactment of a legal framework by the National Assembly as centered by the President, and also put mechanism for proper implementation and compliance, and also public education on what whistleblower is all about and what incentives, encouragement, protection we are going to have. Yeah, exactly.
All this now you have mentioned falls under the purview of the federal government. Yeah,
federal government, because based on the experience we have received before, a private member will hardly get attention of the executive to be assented. Sometimes you see, because the legislative process is such that it's not just presenting the bill. It has to go through legislative processes. The committee will work on it. Public hearing will be conducted. The House will, each chamber will consider it, or will concur it, or will also harmonize it, and then send to the president. So there are a lot of rigorous processes, and it is much easier if it is an executive bill, which then all the stakeholders, civil society, media, public, can come to contribute to ensure that we have a very strong and vibrant legal framework that will really meet the expectation of the fighting corruption, because you cannot be fighting corruption without compliance with freedom of information. You cannot be fighting corruption with the refusal to have whistleblower protection legal regime. You cannot be fighting corruption when you are not complying even with other basic, anti-corruption legislation. For example, NAITI the public procurement law that we have, these are all legal framework. Even the asset declaration, which is even the code of conduct, that is even in the constitution. Beside the code of conduct, none of these anti-corruption agencies are even in our constitution, but through the enactment of the National Assembly. But today, the code of conduct has been neglected. As I speak to you, for you to be able to fight corruption, you need to energize the code of conduct, because there are so many properties, so many things that people in public office they come to declare. Some of them, they are not verifiable, and you need them to verify those things.
If, for example, the bill, right, the program right now, the whistleblower policy, somebody has information, where does he go to?
This is why I say, in the legal framework, there will be channel of reporting. Right now, it's scanty. But if you are going to have a legal framework, there will be reporting channels.
There should be a channel.
Yeah, exactly. There will be reporting channels, and this reporting channel will also have the feedback for both the whistleblower and even the other civil society and the media, so that they can verify to make sure that the case is not buried.
Yeah. Because
the tendency is that if you blow and you share maybe political party with the person you are blowing, there is likely going to be cover up.
So let's look at this executive bill that you want proposed. How will this cover the states? Because executive, I think, is federal.
Well, the executive bill that will be coming from Mr. President or from the executive, arm of government, will definitely be a national, bill. But you can also encourage state government to have such kind of, legal framework. For example, some of the states, they have law on fiscal responsibility, they have law on public procurement, and they even have law on freedom of information. So it is about encouraging and leading by example. If currently there are almost 50 or 60% of the states that belong to the ruling party. So if the ruling party is speaking with one tone, after having a national legal framework, they could encourage their governors to also replicate such kind of legislation. But because the government is rice and beans, okay, so you do not have so you do not have the same state governors who believe in what the federal government is doing, even though they belong to the same party. So that is something that the executive and the political the ruling party can do to ensure that there is a seeming looking similar direction from what is happening in the federal and what is happening in the state. Because at the state, we actually need the whistleblowing regime, if not more. But very important, we have that, because a lot of fraud, a lot of maladministration, a lot of discrimination
on state level
are happening at the state level.
Even from
for you to fight corruption, you actually need to make sure that you give attention to the whistleblowing regime and ensure that it is transparent. It is meant to actually properly expose fraud, corruption, maladministration, injustice, but not just limited to just grabbing asset and then you collect the asset and no accountability about the asset.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have very limited time. We haven't even exhausted this topic, because I really am interested in the witness protection program. So maybe next time we'll take the witness protection program. I've been speaking with Auwal Rafsanjani. He is the Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. And next time too, we'll talk about CISLAC. I like the name. Thank you very much for being on Break It Down. We'll be back same time next week.